welcome to this roundup session on the Claw Ballroom. At the same time as this is happening, because this is more or less the roundup today, at the same time as this is happening, there is an enormous queue for butch monologues, which is unsatisfiable by the size of the room. Is that correct? 3 times as many people wanted to go to that. So that means a bigger venue next year for it. I also want to show you this £10 note that's been given to me by somebody, right, which has been, where Mary Stopes has been imprinted on top. So that we don't just change the £5 notes, we change the £10 notes as well. So the purpose of this roundup is because whatever you were doing all day, you would not have been able to see everything. If we only did a sort of day where everybody went to the same thing, first of all, we couldn't hope to cover the incredible range of subject matters that we do need to cover in order to recognize the complexity of girls' and women's lives and how that impacts on boys and men as well. And also, we couldn't fit enough people in. And as it is, you know, this is the most sold out we've ever been, and we would put on more spaces, etc. Can I just have a quick show of hands? Who's coming to Mirth Control tonight? Okay. And who's here tomorrow? Right, good. Well, look forward to seeing you. Don't be late. So on the platform here, we have an array of people who led or contributed to sessions or who journeyed through a number of sessions. And I'm going to ask them to talk in short bites, really, about the things that their session dealt with and some of the conclusions. Now, apologies for the fact that everybody can't see as clearly as you'd like. We can't do anything about the pillars. That's a listed building from 1951. But we'll try to make sure that you can hear properly. And the first person I do want to hear from is Hannah Poole on my left-hand side. Last year, Hannah, who is one of the key programmers, along with Domino Pateman, of the content of WOW, Hannah Poole ran a session last year called the Politics of Afro Hair. And because we've been filming it, we're filming these sessions and putting them on the website, it had 44,000 hits so far. And that prompted us to think not only would we do a number of sessions this year, but also the exhibition, if you haven't seen it, in Spirit Level, which is really a wonderful exhibition, tracking the range of things. But I'm going to ask you, Hannah, to take over in terms of what you dealt with today and what you feel has come out of the sessions that you've done.
Right, thank you, Jude. So yeah, just to reiterate, if you haven't seen it, the exhibition downstairs is of the iconic hairstyle series by the Nigerian photographer J.D. Akai Ojekere. It's on for a couple of weeks, so please go down and see it. It's free, it's phenomenal. So the conversation that we had last year was about the politics of Afro hair. As you said, it's now, it's close to 50,000 now, apparently, views, which to me really speaks to how much Afro hair speaks to how popular culture and society deals with and sees black women. So we had this conversation today here in this space, and several women came up to me afterwards and said, next year you have to do a whole weekend on Afro hair. So I'm just putting that bit in now. I've got witnesses. But tied in with that, we also had an Afro hair meetup, which was hosted by 2 incredible bloggers, Crystal Afro and Angel DK from the Natural Lounge. They had a meetup afterwards where women with all hair types sat and discussed and talked about their journeys, their hair stories, shared skills and tips, which I think was also incredible. The other session that I did today was FGM, which was one of the most powerful sessions, really, that I've taken part of.
Female genital mutilation.
Female genital mutilation. There's been a huge groundswell of activism and campaigning and media spotlights around female genital mutilation at the moment. And that's largely because some of the amazing work that the activists that joined us today, we had Nimco Ali from Daughters of Eve, Efwa, let me get her name right, Efwa Derankunu from Equality Now, some amazing campaigners who are right at the front line. We had the Minister, Lynn Featherstone, setting out the government's mission for FGM. So those two sessions really speak to the difference in WOW. You can go from Afro Hair to FGM. I then went and spoke about Beyonce. So just to talk about those different kind of areas is amazing.
Okay, can I just say a couple of things? 4 years ago when we started WOW, we had an FGM session as a bite.
Yeah.
Nimco Ali did 15 minutes in the Western Pavilion about the importance of addressing FGM in this country. And not only because of that, but certainly she would say it propelled her forward in terms of confidence to take it on, and she's now, along with others, running this extraordinary range of campaigns around FGM. Last week, we went to Clarence House and introduced the idea of Camilla the Duchess of Cornwall does a party for WOW every year to meet many of the speakers. And she, absolutely publicly and absolutely confidently said, I want to support FGM, I want to discuss it, I want it to be known that I am doing that. And I think this is progress, taking taboo subjects and putting them out there.
Taking taboo subjects. So as you said, Nimco spoke. Nimco and I bumped into each other on the floor here, actually. Started talking about hair. And she had at the time this sign that said, "Mitts off my muff." And that was the beginning of her campaigning. And I then, asked her to do a bite for 15 minutes. This week alone, as well as speaking to Camilla, she's also been speaking with Ban Ki-moon, the head of the UN. She's also been speaking with David Cameron. And it just speaks to so much of what happens at WOW is about the conversations around the edges, the small grains of activism that start and then turn into these huge, incredible campaigns.
And going back to the politics of Afro hair, I mean, obviously lots of you in the audience are not of African descent and don't have African hair. But I think the important thing is to try to understand the dilemmas and consequences of society's impression on different groups of us. And could you just take, and also for us not to have to pretend that we do know some of these issues, and also not to be afraid to ask. To say, I know nothing about what the politics of Afro hair is. What is it exactly? So although you and I have talked about this a great deal, just in a short bite, tell us, what are the dilemmas around the issue of Afro hair?
Okay, so the main issue is that society in general views a certain kind of beauty as the official beauty. And that official beauty is the lighter your skin, the straighter and the lighter your hair, the more beautiful you are. So for black women, that equates to if your hair is super curly, if your skin is super dark, you are considered to be less beautiful. So it's all about who owns, so they're the gatekeepers of ideas of beauty. That's why when you turn on the TV, the majority of black women that you see, if you see any in public life, have straight hair. Black women do not have straight hair without going through an awful lot of effort to get it to be like that, whether that's chemicals, whether that's extensions, all kinds of stuff. So the politics of Afro hair is the conversation that exists around owning and being proud to have your hair grow in its natural state.
Okay, so in a way, it's one of a circle of questions that most women end up being confronted with, whether it's about pubic hair, whether it's about weight, whether it's about cheekbones.
Yes.
I mean, all of these ideas of the perfect woman.
The perfect woman and beauty ideals and feeling lesser because of those things.
And also where race and class intersect, actually, because this, I mean, just very quickly, intersectionality is a phrase that has been used a few times. And most people may know what it is, or most people might be nodding, making it clear that they ought to know what it is. But what is it?
So intersectionality is, it's one of these words that's bandied around in kind of academia, but it's a very, very simple concept. It's this concept of, it's what happens when two or more identities meet. So for example, I'm a woman and I'm black. Intersectionality is where my, the struggles perhaps that I find being black clash with the struggles that I find being a woman. So for example, for me, when I'm campaigning about feminism, sometimes a white feminist friend will say something that I find deeply racist. Or if I'm campaigning about race and racism, a black male friend might say something that's sexist. Intersectionality is where those two things clash. And really, the theory of intersectionality is understanding and acknowledging that it's fine for us to have those multiple identities.
Okay, so part of the intention of WOW is to put all of those identities out.
Yeah, and and it might be sexuality, it might be disability, it might be class. There's a whole different load of things. Yeah.
Okay, so as not to keep you waiting, Anthony, I'm going to come to you next. Anthony was part of the Being a Man festival that we did over 6 weeks ago. Yeah, and in order to give time, space and permission for men and boys to talk about the things that they feel constrained by, manipulated with, predetermined to do by ideas around society. Could you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing and why you've done it?
So I work as a poet and as a writer. I go into a lot of schools and I run workshops with a lot of kind of young people. And I use poetry as a kind of platform, as a medium, to try and get them to challenge their perceptions of what it means to be a man. And through that, you offer them a way of organizing their thoughts and their opinions and their sentiments into something that becomes coherent. So you might get the baddest kid in school turn around and write a poem about his brother who is now in prison, or about his mother being beaten up by the dad. And this will be, a lot of the times, they've never expressed these kind of thoughts before. And what poetry does, and the devices that you employ, is it offers a very safe, almost abstract kind of catharsis, where you can go into it and say what it is that's on your mind without wanting to go out and have a fight. So once you kind of create that space, you then are able to challenge, why do men resort to violence? Why do men resort to misogyny? And from that point, you start to look at emotions. Now, most young men think that poetry is an effeminate thing, that the only reason that I can write poetry is because I'm either gay or I'm hypersensitive or something like this, whereas it's never looked at as something that just people in general do. So when you create that comfortability within them, they then begin to open up very, very slowly. And what you realize is that one of the things that they speak about a lot is violence and promiscuity. A lot of young boys think to be a man, you have to sleep with as many women as possible and beat up as many men as possible. And what I do is I kind of have, because I'm not a qualified teacher, I'm able to have these discussions and say to them, where do you get these ideas from? Who told you this? Because they're wrong. And then when you say that when you lose your temper, when you become violent towards somebody else, you're actually showing emotion. Violence is an emotion, but it doesn't ever get categorized in that sense. Whereas when a woman cries, that's emotion. And a man would say, stop crying, you're being emotional. But when he goes and breaks someone's face, that's not emotion. So the problem is that we need to try and find a way of reimagining what constitutes emotion and what men are allowed to say and what men are allowed to do through art.
So can you tell us, like, you weren't always thinking these thoughts?
No. Yeah.
Once upon a time, you were different. Can you want to just tell us a bit about that?
So I grew up in a very male-dominated, my family from Cyprus, so it's very patriarchal. I grew up from a very young age seeing the men in my family sit around tables and talk about politics, talk about religion, talk about colonialism, all these kind of things. And the women were always kind of over there in the kitchen cooking and cleaning and making sure the kids were okay. So I grew up with this kind of view that this is how things should be. And with that comes misogyny. My father, my uncle, they were always saying it's important to sleep with as many women as you possibly can. And it only got to a point where I was doing this for maybe 5, 6 years, and women started to call me horrible things. And I said, I'm not actually a horrible person. I'm just a bit confused. So that made me change the way that I looked at people, whereas a woman was no longer just an object or someone who you desire or someone who you can turn around and say, I conquered. And it was no longer a power thing, which essentially what this whole thing is. It's about power and maintaining power. It was about human life coming into play. And that's when I started to have these thoughts on, I wasn't born like this. When I was 5, I loved my mum more than anyone else in the world. Something happened along the way that made me think that I was raised by my grandmother and I love my mum. Something happened, something very perverse. So that's what made me go in and start to have these kind of new thoughts and feelings towards womanhood in general. Yeah.
But in the Being a Man session that I was chairing, that Anthony was part of, a question was asked, well, feminism actually has now years and years and years of academic frameworks and actually thorough analysis of where the female sits inside a patriarchal society. But I asked Anthony, you know, were there books that he could look at that had similar analysis of the masculine inside society and the impact of that? Were there?
Right, so about 3 weeks ago, we had this discussion with a group of kids in a school, and one of the year 9s came up to me at the end and said, "Sir, the stuff that you're saying about feminism and what men do to women is really quite horrible. Is there any way that I could become a good man? How do I become a good man?" And for the first time, I usually got an answer for most things, but for the first time in my life, I sat down and I said to him, "You know what, dude, I don't know." Because the truth of the matter is, I couldn't say to him, "Go and read books on menism," because there is no such thing. Like, where do men go when they want to break out of patriarchal systems of oppression that have been set up? There is no literature. You can't, Simone de Beauvoir, bell hooks, all these people are there. Women can go and empower themselves through this. But men, if your father isn't there, you've got MTV, you've got Heat magazine, you've got The Sun. These are bad role models. And that's why a lot of young men feel that they're just in this vacuum where they can't actually grow and learn. At 14 years old, where do you go?
Okay, so now I'm going to turn... Thank you, Anthony, thank you. Now I'm going to turn to my right-hand side, because here we have Caroline Bird, who's a writer and a poet. And she, for the last 4 years, has been leading the Under 10 Feminists Corner. And in fact, you had a mixed group today of boys and girls, I think. Is that correct?
No, it was just girls.
Just girls,
yeah.
okay.
But hopefully next year we'll have Under 10's Feminist Corner for boys.
Right. So where do young people go to get their ideas from? And what are you finding in this Feminist Corner? What's happening?
Well, basically, I facilitate a debate. And that might sound like quite a grand term to use with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit of the debate with some quotes. Right? First of all, instead of raising their hand, we decided that that would be more appropriate. As one girl said, like you're punching a tall villain in the face. Okay? And the first thing I asked was, what is feminism? And one girl instantly put up a hand. It means to be fair. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Another girl put up a hand. It means because boys and girls are just as good as each other and they should be treated the same. Yeah, brilliant. We can go. We can go. You know, we can go home. But I said, so you've got this simple idea, which everyone fist pumps in the air as being correct and right and simple. So why does the world find it so complicated? Why do grown-ups find this so complicated? So then we started to investigate maybe where their complications were. So we started off by playing mummies and daddies, right? And they came up with this beautiful scene where and it was very well scripted. The man came home and the mother said, "Help me with the baby." And the father said, "I'm going to go and watch the cricket." Like that, right? And then I said, well, that's brilliantly done. Does anyone have a slightly different family from this? And everyone put up their hands. And so then we re-rehearsed. And it was like, okay, we'll take the dad out, put 2 cats in, add an uncle, or, and we kind of re-rehearsed it in terms of real life. But then we asked the question, where does this come from? Why did they start playing mummies and daddies like that from the age of 4? Instantly, one girl put up a hand, or fist punched the air. It's because it's from the olden days. Yes, because it's from the olden days. Why are we still doing these things from the olden days? So then we talked about gender inequality in the workplace, which is the playground and school. And there are 2 sets of rules in the playground. There are the rules that are set by the teachers, and then there are rules that are set by the children. And because all of these girls were from different schools, they had the chance to kind of share as intellectual peers the problems that they faced in their particular playgrounds. So, for example, one girl said, well, girls have recently been able to play football. A little bit like, you know, when women got the vote in her school. But the problem is that they always put us in goal, or they let us score goals, and they don't really kind of take those games seriously that we take part in, right? And so you've got a bit of a problem there. And then they were talking a bit about girls being mean to each other. And I want to share a piece of wisdom with you because it's just so amazing. They were talking about, girls bullying each other, not kind of allowing each other to be who they are. And there's one girl, she said, it's because if you have a really horrible secret in your heart that weighs in your heart, it makes you be horrible. Which is just so amazing, I just had to share that. So then we talked about adverts. And so even though they know that people can be, boys and girls are just as good as each other, and girls are allowed to climb trees, why is there two sets of Nerf guns? Right, there's a Nerf gun which is for girls, and a Nerf gun which is for boys. One girl raised this point very, very strongly, right? Girls don't have different types of hands. They can hold a male Nerf gun, right? So we came to the conclusion that grown-ups, right, were actually more stupid than them. Because even though they knew that girls and boys were just as good as each other, these adverts were telling them to be separate. And the world had got it wrong. And so I wanted to pass on some direct quotes to you from the young feminists. Right? Just also, they were very aware that maybe people thought they were too young. So they just wanted to kind of preempt that attack. If they can care about feminism, then we should be able to, Livia. You shouldn't have to be a certain age to care about feminism because it's something that's wrong with the world and we're in the world. Ella. If you can, why can't we? Briar, succinct to the point. And then I love this one. If you can, maybe we can solve the problem ourselves. So perhaps the whole problem of feminism should be sorted out exclusively by 7, 8, 9-year-olds. That's the idea there. Okay? Just because young people are less able to make things happen, we can still learn about it so we can do it when we're older. Wise. Vita. No person too small and no job too big. Adina.
Hey. Oh, yes.
Right. And then this one almost is a rhyme. I'm little, you're big. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm going to be Prime Minister tomorrow. That's Maya. There. Right, and then this one, again, very wise, from Manabi. There's no difference because girls aren't aliens and boys aren't aliens. I'm feminist, deal with it. Keisha, just a few more. Now, this was what they are going to change on Monday in the playground. I am going to prove to the boys that girls have made tracks on the football pitch too, because I saw some footprints by the goal that were from high heels. Just because you're a boy, I'm going to choose the games, so you're going to have to catch the girls. And then this last one. I can play video games too, and I can kill 10,000 zombies a day. So that's them, clap them.
Oh, okay, so my question to you, Caroline, is this. Clearly, all these ideas are bubbling up, and we could have sold out that workshop over and over and over again. So do they tell you that these conversations are happening in the schools and that these conversations are easy to have in the playground?
No. That's never been brought up, really. I mean, one girl, when she was asked about what she was going to change on Monday, she said, actually, I think I might tell a teacher if a boy says I can't play something. But that seemed like a new idea.
Right. We did a workshop here on Thursday for primary schools. That's something we've introduced into WOW now, so basically WOW for primary schools. And on Thursday and Friday, we also did think-ins for teachers, primary and secondary teachers, on what is gender equality education and how can that be a curriculum. And this is led with our partners, Mulberry School, who've been absolutely key to helping think through not just how can you sort of have a general idea of fairness in school, but how can you specifically unpack feminism and manism, should it be termed that, how can you unpack it with young people in a way that makes them feel as if they have a framework for discussing it? And at that point, I think I'll turn to you, if that's all right. So, Mila, you conducted the session for 11-year-olds, or you are 11 anyway. Can you tell us the things that you discussed in your session about how young women feel going into adolescence?
We discussed like issues with social media, like anorexia, and how the media kind of promotes being thin. Like there are thinspiration sites to tell you how to become anorexic, like that's something you should do. And we talked about what feminism meant to us, and also who our role models are. Pippi Longstocking was mentioned a few times. And we talked about this lady. She was a blogger and she was from the USA, and she was a teacher in a high school of, I can't quite remember the name of the lessons, but she taught people about feminism, and she said a lot of the people in her class were boys, and she told us why that was because they didn't want to feel that they had to be too masculine. And she asked us the question, if you had a magic wand, what would you make all boys think about feminism? And we said, like, to make them understand that it's not just a place for women, and it's a place for everyone, and men should be involved in feminism too. And I think that was a big part of it, and that really made me think. And I just want to say that the two other people that were with me were really inspirational. One of them was in sixth form, and she was part of a campaign to stop page 3 in the Sun. And I just thought, to do that by that age, I want to do that when I'm older. And also, the other person, she just had such a clear idea of who she was, and I think sometimes I kind of doubt who I am, and I just think she was amazing to have that clarity about herself and be comfortable with herself.
Mila, I think you'll find that... I think you'd be surprised how many people of all ages and all backgrounds say, I am regularly confused about who I am. I mean, I don't think it's a finished story ever. So, take that as consolation. And I think also we go through different phases in our lives when we are confident about speaking out about our views, and other times when actually we feel uncertain. Sometimes because our views change, and sometimes because, we feel as if we're under attack for what we believe. So it's quite hard, I think, to be a continual activist. I mean, but you've obviously taken inspiration from some of these ideas. Again, I want to ask you about your school. Are these subjects that get talked about a lot in your school?
Actually, no. I mean, I just moved up to secondary school, but when I ask a lot of people in my year what feminism is, they don't actually know. They've never heard the word before. And I think there needs to be a lot more education in secondary schools and primary schools to make people aware of feminism. And otherwise there'll be the issues that we're facing, like sexual harassment and everything like that, it won't be spoken out loud, and it will help.
Anthony, you said earlier about your experience that in a classroom they call out various things. They'll punish you for certain things, but you just to explain that again.
Yeah, so one of the observations that I've made teaching is that there is a kind of hierarchy of permissible denigration that gets kind of put out there. So if a child is racist towards somebody else, and it's very clear that this is a racial kind of launch on someone, the teacher will pull that person out and have them either sent to the headmaster, suspended, expelled, detention, all this. It's very severe. And within that, that's the top. And then underneath, in the middle, you have homophobia. So if somebody is homophobic towards somebody else, the teacher again will say, all right, listen, we need to have serious words, see them at the end of the lesson, and we're going to talk. The last, at the bottom of this thing that I've seen, is sexism. Now, the amount of boys that use sexism as banter to other girls, the things that they say to them, and the teacher hears and will just say, Aaron, stop that. Just stop. And that's it. That's it. Something is very wrong with that whole thinking, because I think that's one of the reasons why sexism is so rampant in our societies, because it's not policed in the same way as what homophobia and racism are, and it should be.
Okay, so can I just ask you, Mila, if you go into your school and you talk about yourself as a feminist, would you be comfortable doing that?
I actually do that to my friends, but like, if people aren't my friends, they look at me in a weird way, like, are you crazy? And it's really sad that people think that, because they haven't been told what a feminist really is, so they do not understand, and they judge you on it.
Right, Caroline, I know that you came out as a feminist at a young age, and had a situation in the playground a few times where people were critical or, you know, nasty at the idea, assumed certain things.
Yeah, and there were really strict rules. You know, you could you could do daisy chains, or you could wrestle with the boys. And I hated playing daisy chains, so I remember, so about 6. So I did wrestling, and then I got this huge man, well, he seemed like a man, he was only about 8, fell on top of me, and I nearly bit through my tongue. And then I went back to doing daisy chains, and I was really bored. But there was a real kind of divide, and you had to, like, lose your friends if you were going to go to the other side. And then obviously you were a tomboy, and that came with lots of, you know, different accusations, and, you know, it was complicated every day.
And in the school you went, you know, just before you graduated to university, before you went to university, was feminism in your school talked about in a respectful and interesting way? Because that's not so long ago.
No, not really. I mean, there was a sense that the whole school was about every girl could be whoever they wanted to be. And yet there were phrases like, well, that's not very ladylike, is it? You know, and there was a kind of don't get up yourself, sometimes tone, which wasn't everyone can be whatever they want to be.
Yes, because I think that what a lot of young women find is that they are encouraged to believe that they should go for the dream, but there's no context really explained about what the backlash might be for that dream, or what the practical realities of trying to mobilize that dream might be when childcare issues, issues to do with violence in relationships, when there are many, many other things that are really left invisible until the last minute, and then suddenly you're out there on your own with your idea that you've got this dream, but actually the rest of the world didn't know you had, or wasn't prepared for you to have it, or wants you to moderate it slightly. Shami, you did a big session on some of the kind of opposition that people find in their own lives to personal liberty. Could you just talk us a little bit about what happened in your session?
Well, firstly, Jude, I've just got to say thank you, because you are amazing, and we love WOW, and don't we? And
thank you.
I've been coming here for since this started, and it's just amazing to watch the growth of it. I've been looking around this room while you've been talking. I have been listening as well, I promise, but I've been occasionally sort of pinching myself at how this thing has grown, and you just touched on something, and the moment was right, and it wasn't happening, and to see so many more people here each year, and next year's going to be the 5th year, and I'm sure it's going to be even bigger. It makes me feel that anything's possible, and this isn't just talk, because I can feel it in the room and in the many rooms here at WOW, and I also see strangers talk to each other. I'm sure you have. Has everybody here spoken to somebody who they just met in the queue for a drink or the loo, or it's always the loo, isn't it? Even at WOW. And I just think there's something very, very special happening here. And so I'm going to give Jude another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we had a Liberty session this afternoon, which was really quite hard at times, and it was called State Failure, Personal Justice, and it was about the ways in which the state fails the most vulnerable women at these dark, dark moments in their lives, and how we can use human rights principles to get justice for them and for their relatives. And I have to tell you, we had lawyers, brilliant lawyers, not, you know, my wonderful colleague Emma Norton and Sarah Ricker from a human rights law firm too, but their clients were awesome. I don't know if you know, but this week in Salisbury we had this really, really important victory in the case of Anne-Marie Element, who worked for the Royal Military Police and served her country and was raped by her comrades. And when she had the audacity to complain about that rape, she was bullied by her comrades and investigated by the mates of the people that raped her, because when you get raped in the Royal Military Police, guess who investigates the rape? The Royal Military Police. And she got bullied instead of helped, and she ended up taking her own life. And nobody cared, basically. And my colleagues were able to use the Human Rights Act to get a proper inquest into what happened. And the coroner this week talked about the culture of bullying and the workplace despair that she experienced. And what we want out of this is to get a better system for investigating this kind of sexual abuse and harassment in the military. We don't want the military to investigate themselves anymore. And just want protection and redress for these women. And then we also heard from, and the most powerful testimony that we heard was from Sharon Hardy, who's Anne-Marie's sister, who reminds me a bit of my dear friend Doreen Lawrence, who we're going to be talking to over the Sunday papers tomorrow morning with hopefully coffee and croissants. I don't know, Jude. Anyway,
definitely croissants.
So Doreen, you see, I bang on about this stuff, but I chose this path. Okay, I'm a sort of lawyer turned I'm a recovering lawyer. Or maybe I'm just in remission, or, you know, you do it one drink at a time. That's the way to. But some people don't have a choice. And this is true of lots of women who become great campaigners. They didn't say, I want to be Prime Minister, I want to be a Supreme Court judge. They were just living their lives, looking after their families, and then one day, boom, something really, really terrible happens. And that's what happened to Doreen Lawrence. And she's taken from being a South London mum to being, after 20 years of fantastic campaigning, to being a national treasure and the symbol of race equality in this country. We're going to hear from her tomorrow. Yeah? Yeah, come on, respect for Doreen. And Sharon Hardy has got the same stuff in her, and I saw it come alive in that WOW session this afternoon when she talked about her sister. She was doing it for her sister. And then we heard from Celia Peachy, whose mum was murdered by her boyfriend, who had murdered a previous partner, and her mum had gone to the police numerous times begging for help and getting no help, and then she was murdered. And I sat there in that room upstairs today listening to the daughter speak for the mother with her little brother sitting in the front row, and that was possible in this WOW space too. And bottom line, some people want to scrap the Human Rights Act, and if they scrap the Human Rights Act, we will not have those positive obligations to hold the police and the military and all the powerful forces in this country to account.
Okay, now I think that although there's a lot of applause for that, I think it would benefit us for you to explain in just a bit more detail why that is the case. Because we read all the time that there'll be plenty of rights around. We don't need this particular act. So could you just detail a bit exactly what we'll be losing if we lose the Human Rights Act?
So here's the thing. The Human Rights Act creates for the first time in English law a positive right to life. Now, it's not a right to eternal life, you understand. We're not talking Botox here. That's a different wow session, right? We're not talking, it's not the Botox session. It's the right to have your life protected. It imposes a positive duty on the government and the state, and that's the police or the military or whoever, to protect your life. And when there is an untimely death, to investigate what went wrong. And before we had the Human Rights Act in 2000, there was no duty to investigate, and there was no duty to protect. And as people told us very eloquently this afternoon, you could not sue the police if they were completely negligent in their duty towards you. And let's face it, women were always the bottom of the pile. Come on, domestic violence, rape, all this stuff. It was never the top of anybody's list.
So
and there was no duty on the part of the police or anyone else to investigate your crime until we had the right to life and the right to positive protection under the Human Rights Act.
So the Human Rights Act supersedes the domestic law?
Well, it is part of domestic law. What it does is the Human Rights Act builds a bridge between domestic law and international law. And it means that international human rights protections that people struggled for all over the world and came together to enshrine after World War II, they now are enforceable in a local court here in the UK. And if that act gets scrapped, we won't have that protection anymore.
Okay, so there's a lot more you can investigate on all of that, but it is worth investigating it, because it's something like many other things which can get obfuscated and then suddenly disappear. And that has, we are about to lose a lot of legal aid. Do you want to just talk about legal aid for a second?
I mean, I was at again, some of the greatest campaigners are mums. My advice to you is don't mess with the mums. Mess with anybody. Mess with the government, mess with the cops. Do not mess with the mums. I was at a rally yesterday outside Parliament because legal aid is basically being shut down. And legal aid is your right to get legal advice and representation when something bad is happening to you. And I'm a grumpy middle-aged woman now, but when I was young, we had legal aid just like we had healthcare for anybody that needed it. And it was a really important pillar of the welfare state, and it meant that if you were going to lose your child or your liberty or your place in the United Kingdom or your home or your job, you would get legal advice and representation. And it didn't matter whether you're a millionaire or a, newspaper editor or a politician or any of these people that sometimes get into trouble too, by the way. It didn't matter if you were rich and powerful or you were just an ordinary person. And that has been shut down because politicians and the media said this was a gravy train and it's all just about wicked people. And it is all about wicked people until it's about me, and then it's too late and it's gone. And I stood at this rally, and Janice Sharp, Gary McKinnon's mum, she's not a lawyer, she's just a mum, who defended her son Gary. He had autism and he was looking for blooming UFOs on the internet. But he hacked, you know the story? And he hacked into the Pentagon computer. And those clever American people, instead of giving him a job for life to sort out their security system, they wanted to treat him as a cyber terrorist. And Janice campaigned, and again, we used human rights principles to keep him here in the UK.
Okay, so a lot of, part of what WOW does as well, I think, is to try to unlock pieces of information for people. But a big part of WOW is to give you the opportunity to bump into liberty, or bump into the work that Anthony's doing, or bump into Women for Women refugees, bump into organisations that are campaigning or individuals that are doing things. It's really a kind of knowledge-based festival that allows you to investigate things you didn't know about, Afro hair, politics, and then think, well, do I want to support this and join it, and so on.
And Jude, you make it so much fun as well. And do you know what I mean? Because people like me do this work all week, and we get just a little bit grim and worthy and miserable, and and there we go descending into. She's wearing gold, I'm wearing black. Do you notice? And there's something going on. And what's so wonderful about WOW is bringing these values into the cultural space, because we are human beings and we want justice, but we want to be loved as well, and we want to have fun, and you make it possible. So thank you all, and thank you, Jude.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, can I thank our signers as well? All through today, they've been absolutely amazing. And the speech texts as well. And I think that it would be great if more people wanted to get involved in speech texting or signing, because we just need a lot more people who can do this, and it would really help. Can I now turn to Jónína Leósdóttir, who I met first of all when we went to investigate doing a WOW in Iceland, and we're still thinking of doing a WOW in Iceland. But Jónína has a very particular and wonderful story about being, if you like, the first lady married to the Prime Minister of Iceland, and as a gay couple, an out gay couple, noticing and understanding really what it's like to travel and be the partner in a global context of leadership. And I mean, we've emancipated that far, but I know that you still had trials, tribulations and challenges, and I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and maybe we could say that I'm here because I've just written a book. It's not published in English. I'm not here just because I was married to somebody, or I'm married to somebody.
Jónína is a writer, a well-known writer, travels around literary festivals all over the world too.
I've just written my 12th book. It was published just before Christmas, and it's about my relationship with Jónína, my wife, who was the Prime Minister of Iceland until May last year. And we decided to tell our story because after she became Prime Minister very suddenly in 2009, the global media suddenly were extremely interested in our relationship. And by that time, we had been together since 1985, but we had kept our relationship secret for a long, long time. Until 2000, then we moved in together and it became public, and we went into a civil partnership. And we were just going to keep it like this, just private for the two of us, and the world media didn't allow us to do that. So Jónína got asked a lot as the first openly gay world leader. She was asked to do a lot of interviews, and she simply didn't have time because she became Prime Minister because Iceland was almost bankrupt. I'm sure you all remember we had this huge bank crisis in Iceland, financial crash, and she was a very well-liked minister in the government, and she was asked to take over. So as she didn't have any time to do interviews or become a gay icon around the world because she was busy, we decided we still needed to do something. We could understand, we had a lot of pressure to tell our story. And we understood that it's important for people who get to high positions in societies that are open to tell their story, to give some other people who live in other countries, let's not mention Russia, Uganda, or whenever, something to look up to and see it is possible. Because when we started our relationship in 1985, there were no legal rights for gay people in Iceland. I didn't know anyone who was in a same-sex relationship. Shall I go? I can talk for hours.
You're enjoying it.
There are just so many things to explain, you see, because when we started our relationship, Jónína, my wife, was 42, and she was married, and she had 2 children, and I was 31. I was also married, had been married for 13 years, and I had 1 boy who was 4 years old. So we came from that kind of background. This happened to us very suddenly. It happened to me, and I told her in a very strange way that I thought perhaps maybe I had some feelings for her, and I didn't even know her. And we progressed from there, and all the way through 14 years of being more or less in the closet, at least keeping our relationship secret, until all of a sudden the whole world knew about us. So we've been through a very strange experience. We've been together almost 30 years, and that's what the book is about, and that's why I'm here. And now I'll shut up.
But could you just give us a snapshot of how world leaders and countries took to your situation? You know, where were you included, where were you not included, etc.?
Yes, I can tell you about 2 official visits. You know, heads of state, they go on these official visits to each other's countries, and these are the most formal occasions you can imagine. Everything is protocol down to every single minute, and we went on 2 such. I went with her to some other on some other foreign trips, but 2 official visits, and they were 2 very different countries and very differently received. We went to the Faroe Islands, first of all, in 2010. And the Faroe Islands, they are a little country. They're our cousins, our friends, our Nordic friends. They're our next door neighbors on a smaller island than Iceland in the middle of the North Atlantic. And everything went smoothly until the night. These occasions are always just about 2 days. And on the night, during the night, we were supposed to have the gala official dinner. And then all hell broke loose because there was an MP there in the Faroe Islands who called the media and told them, I'm not coming to have dinner with these ladies. They are unethical and they are just horrible people. And he made such a fuss. And we only heard about it afterwards because all the Faroese people who were at the dinner, they came one after another excusing this guy, because he is very homophobic, and they kept telling us that he's not speaking on our behalf. And it didn't bother us because he must be the kind of guy you don't want to have dinner with anyway, since he's like that. So we didn't miss him. And it was very nice that on the plane the next day we were it was a Faroese airplane, and the captain came on, as they do when you're leaving, and he made gave us a strong message saying that Jónína was on board the plane with her wife, and that we were extremely welcome on board this airplane. And also, I don't know whether it's something to do with this happening, but this was a huge event in the small Faroe Islands. And when we were there, this was September 2010, there was no LGBT society or anything. And if people realized they were lesbian or gay or whatever, they moved to Copenhagen to go away from this small society. It's very difficult very often to be different in a small society. But after 2010, they have started an LGBT society, and they even have had gay pride twice in the Faroe Islands. And they say that per capita, it's the biggest gay pride in the world. So things have changed. And shall I tell you about the second official visit? This was in May last year, in April last year, just before Jónína left office. She is now retired. She is 71. She will not be happy that I'm mentioning her age. Sorry about that. But we went to China, and first of all, there was a lot of fuss because they, obviously in China, as anywhere else, they had never accepted a same-sex couple on an official visit. And there was a lot there were many meetings between our people and their people, and there were a lot of discussions what to do. And Jónína, she just gave her staff one rule: just make sure that Jónína is treated exactly the same as a spouse of the opposite sex. And that's what they had to work with, our protocol people. And some of the media around the world said that I had been airbrushed from this visit. And I was certainly not mentioned on state television in China, but I was mentioned in the papers. I don't know, of course they're not familiar with our name, so maybe they thought my name meant that I was a male spouse, I don't know. But I was interviewed by some papers there. They had big interviews, and I met the Prime Minister. I was sitting at the high table in the official dinner. I was sitting here, then Jónína and the Prime Minister of China, and he was very civil. Everybody was very polite, very civil. I don't know, obviously, what they were thinking, but they treated me very nicely. And I got this very feminine, cute spouse program, visiting a university and planting a tree, and visiting an art museum, which I loved. I loved all of this because I met some students, some Chinese people who had been studying Icelandic for only a few weeks, and they sang for me and read poems, and it was a wonderful visit, and no problems, not like in the Faroe Islands. Now I'll shut up.
Thank you, thank you. But I mean, that also proves that sometimes just by living your life along the way that you believe it should be lived, you end up, like Doreen Lawrence, through calamity, or yourself through love, you end up leading movements. And so we all have to remember, actually, that the little thing that we might believe is insignificant about whether we do or don't act ethically, sometimes that is the very thing that will change the world. Now, I'm going to finally end up here talking to Promi Reza, who is one of Mulberry School. She has been with the WOW Festival for 4 years, I think, now. So,
Mulberry School!
So you'll know to be near your microphone because you've seen that before. How old are you now, Promi?
I'm 16.
So you've been coming to WOW since you were 12. Could you just give us a kind of a sense of what you've learned and what, I know that Mulberry School already is a great learning environment, but what's WOW meant to you? What do you want it to do in the future?
I think before WOW, or even in school, I didn't know what feminism was. And I think it was near the end of year 7 that I started learning about it, and then I was introduced to WOW. And I made my first speech about bravery and what it is to be a girl, and how I feel about being a girl, and how I feel about being who I am. And I think from that first speech I made in front of not a lot of people, but some people, that just made me feel so empowered, that I actually have a voice, and that's exactly what I thought WOW was. Somewhere anyone can talk about their story and what it is to be them. And like you said before, you can just talk to someone you've met today or met in the loo, and you can be talking about anything and your personal stories, and it just makes you again feel empowered. Yeah.
What are you going to go on and do? What decisions are you making about your life at the moment?
As everyone, I'm still confused, but I think I'd love working with organizations that actually stand up for women, actually champion women's education. And I'm always inspired, like today in the morning when I went to watch Malala talk. She's the same age as me, and she's such an inspiration. I think seeing her talk, seeing her in person today, I think made me feel that dreams can be real. You can champion things that you believe in, and you don't have to go too far. And I think Malala's story, although it's huge, you can still relate to her. She's a girl who's championing education, and that's exactly what I want to be. And WOW's providing that sort of opportunity for me to see her and relate to her, and then go on with my life doing the exact same thing, and speaking to girls my age, and I guess speaking to them about feminism, about education, and what they can be doing to champion it themselves.
I think this is a big thing. I mean, there's a lot of young people here. When young people hear from other young people, Anthony going into schools as you're doing, Caroline going into schools, you haven't gone to schools yet, Mila, but you probably will. I mean, the clarity of that relationship, identifying with somebody your own age, is a massive influence. And so although adults like to think that we're a huge influence on young people, yes, of course we are, and they have got no choice about that. But it's really strong when young people take the initiative and decide that they are going to be the ones that have a voice. And there's lots and lots of young women sitting down the front row, and boys too. And I just want to say that, the great revival of feminism is actually really coming from young people. And that makes people who are older, in their 70s, 80s and 90s, feel as if their life was more worth living than they thought it was. I mean, that's something that you need to remember. Young people make older people feel as if their life mattered. So, folks, we've come to the end of this particular session. There's a lot of you here, and if you're, we just wanted to mention that we've got walk-up tickets, some walk-up tickets left for mirth control. I think they're £10, the walk-up tickets, and there's not many of them, but there's some. And if you haven't been before, you'll see the only all-women's orchestra playing that was formed especially for WOW, the WOW Orchestra, made up of young women who come together just to be in an orchestra with all women. Sandy Todsvig, Jeremy Hardy, Sharon D. Clark, the blues singer, Sheila Hancock, and there are some tickets left, and there shouldn't be. So if you're thinking that you might have something that you were going to do tonight, change those plans immediately, and come to Mirth Control. And then after Mirth Control, we've got this amazing cabaret on Cryptese, where some of the most amazing disabled women show you why they can be as sexy as the rest, and why the joint's definitely humming when they explain what they feel about feminine sexuality as far as they're concerned. Can I thank all the speakers on the stage for doing this WOW Roundup, and to you for coming.